Welcome to ET Times, I am Jenny Lewis. A group of 21 state GOP senators from Pennsylvania called on Republican leaders of the U.S. House and Senate to delay certification of the Electoral College votes until a legal battle mounted by President Donald Trump against the Pennsylvania Secretary of State is heard in court. Republican senators, in a letter to Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, said that they believe the election results in Pennsylvania should not have been certified by Pennsylvania's Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted 5 separate pictures under the swagger, to which is defined as to represent America with pride, humility, and professionalism. Now let's break down each of these 5 pictures. The first picture is a meeting held by Trump with members of the Pentagon. The second is with Stephen Mnuchin, the Secretary of Treasury. This one is pretty easy to read, as previously Mike Pompeo and Mnuchin had worked together to provide economic sanctions against the SCPS companies, and also any individuals with ties to the CCP. Then the third picture was with Bill Barr, the former Attorney General. Now in my last video had mentioned that Barr could potentially become a key witness and testify. Now Mike Pompeo, including in this picture. Bill Barr shows that it has a very hidden message. Trump and Barr have a complicated relationship. Even then, Trump at the last second drink Barr's resignation seemed like everything was all right again. Maybe Barr is a hidden weapon. It is so hard to read because it seems that Bill Barr had really done nothing in to help the Trump campaign, as well as Linwood also ended up calling Barr a patriot on Twitter. Now we could speculate that Barr could still provide some use for Trump's RD to victory. The next picture is even more cryptic. Gina has booked. The director of CIA is in the picture now. This proves 2 things. She is still alive and it's not arrested or jailed otherwise. Pompeo wouldn't tweet the picture this way. Gina Haspel served as the deputy director of CIA under Mike Pompeo. She was quite close to the entire Trump administration. We had previously covered her quite a lot during the initial over the dispute regarding the Frankfurt server, as there were rumors about her being injured during a firefight at the CIA facility in Frankfurt. Now this picture also tells us that at least Mike Pompeo trusts her, which could mean that even if Gina was compromised, Pompeo played an integral role in turning her around to work for the good guys. And the last picture is with Robert O'Brien, the National Security Advisor. His role is advising the president on any national security issues, which most likely include foreign interferences and domestic security, and such O'Brien is again confirmed by Pompeo as a key member of the Trump administration. In the past 4 years overall, these 5 pictures, among with the 20 others that Mike Pompeo has tweeted out, seems to suggest that Pompeo may be wrapping up his tenure as the Secretary of State. In an interview with American thought leaders last night, Pompeo says this about the CCP. You go back all the way to Tiananmen Square. We've known the nature of this regime, and frankly, the freedom-loving people across the world have known the nature of the authoritarian regimes throughout history. And yet we ignored it. Pompeo explained that the reason for the disregard of the CCP's grave human rights violations were a great extent due to the existence of a belief that if the United States engage in fair and reciprocal trade agreements, the situation would ameliorate. However, reality shows that the idea was clearly false, always through. He continued to answer by saying that President Trump understood the failure that engagement policy from an outset, and changed the American stance fundamentally, adding that it is not just the United States that changes view on China, but the whole West. And I think Mike Pompeo is one of the few who truly understands the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party and what it's behind it. He also says we took our eye off of enormous threat, and now it's now upon us. And now inside the gates the Communist Party of China is here in America, and the Trump administration has begun in every dimension to turn the ship in the right direction to get America to once again do the right thing to protect itself from communist threats in China. Pompeo was then asked why he has been focused more on freedom of religion than any other Secretary of States. He answered is at the center of every civilization. This idea that human beings have the inherent dignity because of their humanists. And if you get that piece wrong, bad things flow from that. Pompeo is one of the most vocal sitting U.S. government officials when it comes to the CCP. He's also a very vocal supporter of freedom of religion in China. He has spoken repeatedly about the brutal persecution against the likes of Uyghur Tibetans, following in House Christians. Let's move on to our next topic. On Tuesday, Georgia will be holding a runoff election to ensure that Republicans will still hold the Senate majority. Last night, President Trump held a rally in Georgia. He said he won't concede the presidential race. Trump in the rally says it's a do-or-die situation for Republicans in this election, and Trump weren't. That should the Democrats take the majority, they will exert a power over Americans in its livelihood in unprecedented manner. Here what he says is that the liberal Democrats are trying to capture Georgia Senate seats, so they will have absolute power over every aspect of your lives. If the liberal Democrats take the Senate and White House, he said, and they are not taking this White House, we will fight like hell. I will tell you right now, his words were quite encouraging, and the crowd was very large and very reactive to that. Trump also said that he hopes Vice President Mike Pence will do more than just carry out a ceremonial role during the joint session of Congress to count electoral college votes. He says, I hope my Pence comes through for us. I hope our great Vice President comes through for us. He's a great guy. Of course, if he doesn't come through, I won't like him very much, so he really gave a warning to Pence. As to how much is Pence willing to do during the joint session in a separate campaign event in Georgia on Monday, Pence told a crowd of Trump supporters to promise that Trump and Republicans will have their day in Congress. Now, Pence says, we'll hear the objections and we'll hear the evidence, but he didn't elaborate on the role he plans to play. Kelly Loeffler is also set on January 6 that she will be voting to object. As well as President Trump at the American people wants to hear a fair election and support the objection to the Electoral College vote certification process. One thing to watch out for is that the news popping up today regarding any machines from Dominion breaking down, or if we have any pipe leaks. In Georgia, during the voting process, I want to shift the attention to analyzing the possibility of Pence working towards a Trump win. Before I do so though, take this time to like the video, subscribe to the channel and comment below what you would like to see. Also, make sure to turn on the notification as well. Follow me on Twitter and Parler at DavidSangBTN. Alright, let's talk about what other scenarios that can play out during the day of January 6th in terms of Pence's role. Now I want to say is that his role in the Constitution is quite ambiguous. So there's going to be a lot of things up for interpretation by pretty much everyone. Think about this. The Constitution doesn't necessarily restrict the capacity of what the Vice President can do in the joint session. It's very ambiguous, but this is the other thing. Does Pence want to side with the Constitution or with Trump? We have to understand one thing. The Constitution has been used as a weapon against the people of this country. It has both provided the playground for extreme progressivism and the evil brewing of the voting fraud. If Pence is to be trapped by the words of the Constitution, he will not be able to step up. So what can he potentially do that force the objection to actually happen? Is the first and most basic step. After thinking about it, I think the best evidence that Trump can provide to that hearing is the DNI report on foreign influence in this election. Because this is actually the big way to invalidate the election, I don't really see a way for Trump to win through the Congress. The Democrats are going to be making sure that Trump doesn't, because going with the regular constitutional stuff, it's the processes are too complicated and up for interpretation. Here's the thing. Anything that will eventually end up in the Supreme Court right now is pretty bad worse. Not sure if the Supreme Court would ever rule in favor of Trump. Pence could also, according to Jenna Ellis, delayed the certification of the Electoral College votes and asked the legislatures in 6 states where the results of the election happen contested, which slate of electors should be chosen. This could work out 2 ways. One is to knock down the electoral votes for Biden, and then proposing to send Trump slates of votes instead. The governors in these states which had certified the electors who cast her loads for Joe Biden. But on December 14th, Republicans electors in these states and New Mexico is well cast. alternate states of elector votes for Trump, setting up what was called a dueling elector scenario. Jenna Ellis suggested that Pence could ask the respective state legislatures of the 6 contested states which of the 2 states of electors was in accordance with state law. Article 2, Section 1.2 of the U.S. Constitution. It says the Constitution provides that each state is to decide for itself how its electors will be chosen, because the slate that was sent to Congress is the one that Governor signed off on. It technically holds more service value and congressional value. But this doesn't necessarily mean that it is the solidified one. So Pence could technically push the responsibility back to each state now in these 6 contested states. Most are Republican majority. However, this would most likely mean with that massive pushbacks and objections from the Democrats will happen. So we'll have to see how that plays out in another scenario. If Biden and Trump both received less than 270 electoral votes on January 6, then a contingent election is triggered, in which each state's delegation in the U.S. House of Representatives cast one vote to determine the president, while the vice president is decided by a vote in the U.S. Senate. Also, there is one more scenario. Trump says in a tweet the call for Pence to reject the votes outright as fraudulent. But exactly how he does it is still unknown, as Pence's power in Congress is mostly ceremonial. This may be what I said about giving the evidence to justify the rejection of votes. The Democrats will argue that it violates the 1887 Electoral Act, and that it would take it up the Supreme Court. Maybe this way, the Supreme Court would actually take a look at the case. We can't guarantee that it will favor Trump, because with the justices ruling in the Texas case, we don't know right now. Many speculate that Pence may not even be 100% sure he's going to be helping Trump. I personally think he will, and he will give the Congress a run for its money and type it. Just who knows that what could happen, right? Remember, though, each of these steps are Democrats coming up with resistance and excuses from the Constitution. There are also likely planning equal amounts of reactions to any of the scenarios I mentioned. Now, what I think Pence will at least do is allow the normal processes to occur, allow the 2-hour debates to happen, and let there be a chance for Trump to give the evidence. I actually think the evidence is the key part of the whole joint session tomorrow. Honestly, we know that the House is doomed and there is no Republican majority. Thus the chance of rejection or objecting to the votes is very low, which means the only way to flip some Democrat House members is to give them the evidence they so desperately want to see. This is also where I mentioned that on Wednesday there is likely not going to be a result by the end of the day. As well, there is most likely not going to be a clear-cut answer that is going to satisfy the half of the population by the end of it. What we're really waiting for is a miracle, and I'm not seeing this as a joke. There is so much uncertainty in place tomorrow that anything could happen. Our last topic today is about Senator Josh Hawley. He wrote on Twitter that a group of Antifa members threatened his family in Washington home on Monday night. He said that he will not be intimidated now. Group called Shut Down DC, who is affiliated with Antifa, posted to Twitter late Monday a video where a group of people walked to the front of his house near DC, and for an hour held signs and carried candles while shouting slogans against him through the loudspeakers. The group later issued a statement on their website confirming that the reason they protested at Hawley's house was because he took a stance against the Electoral College certification process. Shut Down DC activist Patrick Young, in a statement late Monday, alleged that Hawley is trying to silence voices of voters and claimed that bulk of the votes that they would throw out comes from black and brown voters. He further claims that Hawley's stand signifies an attempted coup waged by silencing the voices of the people of color. Hawley later issued a separate Twitter post in response to Shut Down DC's self-described visual. This whole situation is similar to the period in China with communist youth. What group up and marched to a targeted person's or scholar's house calling out their quote-unquote crimes against the country. The Antifa group labeling Hawley as trying to silence the voice voters is quite ironic, given that voter fraud is the action that truly crashed to voter integrity as well. Showing up late at night in someone's house is quite intrusive. The political crisis the United States faces brings into the open a contest of the soul of this country.